Well, we are going to start a very sort of a series of lectures in trying to just review or reconstruct the reconstruction of religious thought of Islam. So the modes of just motivation of trying to revisit this very important seminal work, which had a tremendous influence right from 1930s. The whole of Muslim, we can say, thought process. It's a very important seminal work in that sense that it has very much influenced the whole of scholarship, Muslim scholarship in general, particular or generally also, and if you say it in the history of how we see things, it has been hugely influential. So, and there have been numerous primary and secondary works which have been there, which are there, or which people are also attempting it in different ways and means to revisit the ideas which are there in this very important work. So the aim of this, what I should say, the attempt which we are going to do in the series of lectures, which is going to review or attempt to see reconstruction studies in both retrospective mode as well as a prospective analysis. So since 1928 or 1930s, when they were first published, there were 6 lectures with the addition of the last lecture, is religion possible? There are 7 lectures, so it's maybe more than what I should say, 16, it would be 90 years or more than nearing a century, almost less than a century, more than 95 years have been there since this book has been written. So there have been a lot of debates or a lot of issues which Allama Iqbal addressed. They have to be seen within the attempts of their times. And a lot of issues he left for posterity or for future scholarship, that they should carry on those questions, and they should, what I should say, carry from the point, or it should be debated, should carry to the next generation of scholars, which have not issues which have been addressed, which have been partially addressed, or which are there staring in that sense. So there can be 2 ways of trying. This is how I understand. There can be 2 studies once we study this whole reconstruction of religious thought. So either it can be reconstruction era before reconstruction and era after reconstruction. So we'll have 2 lenses or 2 glasses. So we are going to see things how they were before reconstruction, the sort of scholarship of addressing those questions which Iqbal has done in these 7 chapters, the sort of topics he has discussed. So before 1928 or 1934, how things have been vis-a-vis Muslim world and the rest of the world, and from that point, this point, how things are evolving, or with a peep to future also in the prospective sense. So we are going to see things both ways in that sense. So since reconstruction, this is a very heavy book. There are more than 150 references of philosophers, of poets, of theologians, of legalists, what I should say, of scientists, historians, poets. So the breadth and the scholarship is huge, and there can be long and winded sentences, or there is a non-linear way things sometimes seem to be addressed, and there seems to be a partial disconnect in the sense that There are a lot of issues. This may be Iqbalian style, the way. So he has addressed some of in these long sentences. There are many debates, and in the first reading, it might seem that they have been left unaddressed, or they are not conclusive. The conclusivity is not there, or the sort of coherence. The coherence is in the largest scheme, but once we just if we want to pin down some particular sentences, they are topics, or they are questions, unanswered questions or answers there, which are there. So in the sense, so in this introductory thing, the point which I want to say is, for example, Iqbal, if we just introductory, the Quran is a book which emphasizes deed rather than idea. So there are men to whom it's not organically possible to assimilate an alien universe by living as a vital process, that special type of inner experience on which religious faith ultimately rests. Moreover, the modern man, by developing habits of concrete thoughts, habits which Islam itself fostered at least in their earliest stages of their cultural career, has rendered himself less capable of the experience which he further suspects because of liability of illusions. So the more schools of Sufism have no doubt done good work, have done good work in shaping and directing the evolution of religious experience in Islam. But their later day representatives, owing to the ignorance of modern mind, have absolutely have become incapable of receiving any fresh inspiration from modern thought and experience. They are perpetuating methods which were created for generations, possessing a cultural outlook differing in more important aspects from our own. Your creation and resurrection, says Quran, are like the experience, like the or resurrection of a living experience of the kind of biological unity embodied in this work requires today a method of physiologically less violent and psychologically more suitable type of concrete type of mind. So these lectures, which were delivered in Madras Literary Society in Aligarh and Hyderabad, and so what Iqbal says at the end, I have tried to meet, even though partially, this urgent demand by attempting to reconstruct religious philosophy with regard to philosophical tradition of Islam and more recent developments in various domains of human knowledge. And the present moment is quite favorable for such an undertaking. Classical physics has learned to criticize its own foundations, and as a result, the sort of materialism it necessitated is rapidly disappearing, and the day is not far off when religion and science may discover hitherto unsuspected mutual harmonies. And we should remember there are no finalities in philosophical things, and our duty is to carefully watch the progress of human thought and maintain a critical, independent attitude. So, in this things, there can be 3-4 themes which are later being elaborated upon by the subsequent chapters. So, what it seems from the first reading is that there's emphasis of Quran, how it sees things in that sense. And it's also the contrary of maybe in 1930s, maybe scientific materialism had been, there was 300 years of Newtonian mechanics. It had a sort of scientific determinism was somehow attached to that philosophy or that paradigm, and it had its secondary and subsequent influences when those ideas were taken in social sciences. So it had a sociological the air that time would have not, it was more tuned to rationalism, materialism, skepticism, and which was somewhat not what I should say friendly with the religious bent of mind. So Iqbal is trying to allude to that in that sense that it may not appeal to people who what we see, what's modern mind. Modern mind is having a concrete believes in reductionism, determinism. He is only the sense perceptions and the logic which it supports. His metaphysics is basically that. And further, if this is the case, in those times, the Muslim societies or religious societies, so the sort of direction with mystics or Sufis had developed, it was somewhat inimical, or it could not come up to the challenge. For example, if religion was in defense, the popular techniques of Sufism or the popular prevalent ways of what I should say clothing religion, or the arguments how you can present religion. The Sufis, they had there was some inadequacy in that sense, and the sort of cultural outlook it necessitated. It was somewhat problematic in how Iqbal saw things. So, in that sense, Iqbal is also saying that, for example, the way the quantum theory had developed started beginning of 19th century. So maybe what it means to go from classical to quantum. So if classical mechanics or classical physics has some determinism attached to it, and as human minds, as Laplace said that give me initial conditions, I will explain, I'll say where after a billion years where the next planet is. So he did not, he only, what I should say, the idea of God was only taken to the point where the universe had started. Otherwise, the human capacity of human logic, reason, materialism was such that if we know initial conditions, if we know laws, we can exactly predict the future in that sense. But in that development, maybe quantum mechanics had uncertainty principle and other things had developed. So sort of this determinism, which Iqbal also says, which was associated with classical mechanics, it had to be somewhat, I would not say replaced or displaced. There was a touch of the people became suspect of that determinism, at least in the operational terms. Even though maybe there are quantum mechanical determinists there, and it's up to 9, that it doesn't somehow, quantum mechanics doesn't somehow question determinism. This is also a viewpoint. But one interpretation could be taken it that way. So he was trying to see it that way, that if science and religion can have mutual harmonies, and they have to be what I should say, the role of a student of religious a student of comparative religion or science or philosophy should be aware of those developments and try to those arguments can be seen in defense of religion in that sense. So you can see there are 3 things. There is Quran. If I just take the preface, there is Quran. There is lack of Muslim mind at that time to just come up to terms with that day contemporary knowledge, and there is what I should say critique on mysticism. And there is the how the new developments in science, particularly the interpretations of quantum mechanics, can be somewhat helpful in just trying to come to the point of view which religion or which Iqbal wants to defend, and the role it has. So if you broadly say this reconstruction of religious thought, so there are 7 lectures. So each lecture is for example, this knowledge in religious experience, philosophical test of revelations of religious experience, concept of God and meaning of prayer, human ego, his freedom and mortality, immortality, spirit of Muslim culture, the principle of movement in structure of Islam, and the last one, is religion possible? So each lecture there can be this is each lecture is a topic in itself. You can just whole lot of themes can be absorbed in one lecture, and there can plots and subplots in these individual lectures, which may be which may have their own. You can construct. We can illustrate or elaborate. They can be topics in their own respects. What we are going to do, we are going to see each lecture and see how wherever things have been left for or which we are partially addressed, or how I see it personally. Also, it's also sort of my subject to my engagement since a very long time with this book. So where I feel, so maybe a lot of people may agree or disagree, it's besides the point. So where Iqbal has left some of the things unresolved for future, or where things are settled, or where things can be seen in some other broader light, or we can supplement or complement the arguments which Iqbal tries to see in that sense. So if I just say, for example, without which we are going to do in the coming lectures, so if I broadly just see what are the main, what are the topics, not in that sense, it may not be exhaustive in that sense, because but if I have a classification, you can say a classification which can be, which I have taken from Mustansir Mir, maybe. So I'll just elaborate on this. So which are this is lectures, expositions, and comments. So how Iqbal takes theory of knowledge. So if you will just broadly classify it, the Reconstruction writings. So here I'll say one thing is that a lot of people are saying that this Reconstruction writings is not a book of philosophy, but even though you need, it's very terse and dense. Without understanding of philosophy, things cannot be there. But a lot of Muslim thinkers, they will say that it's more a sort of new ilm kalam. Ilm kalam, here I want to say, is that a discourse which was prevalent in medieval times or late medieval times, where the shukuk, where the doubts about religion, about revelation, about God, how those doubts which were taken by those mutashikeen, by those kalam theologians, and there are a whole school, so the whole barrage of arguments by which a new scholarship came that was known as ilm kalam, which try to defend basically the primacy of religion or theology or revelation in that context. So people will take, a lot of people say that this Reconstruction is more a ilm kalam of 20th century in that sense. So you can agree with this characterization if you want to. But the point where the main topics, there are many topics which are there, but if for the what I should say brevity of this introductory lecture, for example, I'll just try to say there are, for example, there is a theory of knowledge in the first 2-3 lectures. So it's, or Iqbal's theory of knowledge, or theory of knowledge which is in concurrence with how Iqbal sees things. There's Iqbal's, how Iqbal understands time in that sense, and his understanding of time is very much there. There is his theory of ijtihad, and there is this, how notions of God, nature, and man, how they are interfacing in third leg. So there's that thing. There's ijtihad in that sense, and and how Islamic doctrines are operating as principles of this society. So if I just say, for example, in his theory of knowledge, so he's in the first few chapters, or in the, you can say, the lot of what you can, there can be a disconnect also, how you see Iqbal as a poet and Iqbal as what his writings are there. Apparently it seems, but you need a bit of an eye for details, where you can also connect to his poetry with his larger prose literature. So that disconnect can somehow be, I will not say resolved, but you can have connections, and those hidden connections can be there. So whatever he has been writing poetry, because the way poetic way of expressing things is more emotive, it's more emotive, and it's somewhat connected with the how the societal part of it, the aesthetic and emotive aspects of things, and the logic and reason and rationale and philosophy, they come later. While in case of Reconstruction writings or his other writings, political writings, they are, or his thesis metaphysics. So you can say there is a carefully he has the logic and the prose. It's a carefully the construction. It's a carefully careful investment to investment as far as how he has given the exposition of the ideas which he wants to defend or which he wants to expound in that sense. So if, for example, in his theory of knowledge, so he is trying to say, for example, there is not the Iqbalian theory of knowledge, but if you can reconstruct Iqbalian theory of knowledge in that sense, is that he is not the way 19th century German philosophies, whether it's Hegel, Kant, or whether it's how Muslim philosophers like Ghazali and how things have been elaborated when he left. Maybe he's trying to somehow correct, or he's trying to find a middle ground. How mystics somehow just how Ghazali's way of looking at things and how it had its problems, and how Kant's not even though he finds rationality inadequate as far as ultimate truths are concerned, he gives religion a place. He gives place, but it's somewhat sort of our inability in that sense. But for Iqbal, taking a religion, it's a positive thing. So he gives religion what he calls Vijdan, or what he calls revelation. So he feels that revelation and rationale, they need not be mutually, they can be complementary in that sense. The way Ibn Taymiyyah also, if you just read Ibn Taymiyyah, he is also saying how conjecture, revelation, and reason, how he has given a very, in this Radul Mantiqin, he has tried to see classification. So reason and revelation, they cannot be necessarily mutually exclusive. So a part of revelation has a rational element in it. So it is a positive way of looking at things as compared to both Ghazali and Kant, who just tried to say there are some fundamental limitations or inadequacies of rationality in that sense. So we can say. You can say on the one hand he could also try to, so if it's rationality and reason, so you can say so from rationality, certain aspects of rationality can also be taken to be scientific or Western, and other side it's religious or Islamic. So he wanted to have some meeting ground for things and reconstruct an epistemology accordingly. So, and in that sense, he has taken what I should say, help. He tries to justify the way we have scientific method. He also want to have a religious method. Here we are a mystic or a religious. So there is a mystic. He carefully selects experiences in his own domains. So the way we have a way of rejecting or accepting data in a scientific method, and we arrive at some. What, for example, what is left most improbable is what we just leave as data, and ultimately we arrive at some minimum thing. So in that sense, the sort of religious test in the following chapters he is also trying to say. So where a mystic or a religious person will also carefully select his those in the maze of his experiences, and he's very careful, and it's no less than a scientific method in that sense. So, for example, in that sense, he is saying that religion may choose to ignore, science may choose to ignore metaphysics, and it has chosen to, but religion cannot. So, in that sense, he is saying that there are some fundamental limits of scientific metaphysics, scientific way of looking at things. But though there can be mutual intersections, so we need not to ignore. We need not to ignore or do away with the way religion treats things as such. So this is so to be. So we'll just develop on these ideas in the coming lectures. The second is how Iqbal sees time. For example, he sees a historical time, and he sees pure time and serial time. And time, both, for example, though Iqbal was a philosopher, so he tries to see serial time, and time in the McTaggartian sense, in the Bergsonian sense, in the Iqbalian sense, and notion of pure duration, how Bergson constructed it. So you have past, present, and future. There is a succession as to attach to it the meanings of past, present, and future, and which is serial time. But Iqbal says beneath the appearance of serial duration, there is a true duration, which is change without succession. And this is the time which is experienced, experienced from inside by the appreciative self rather than the efficient self, and it's the fact and not as thought or calculated. So you can say both Bergson and time saw time as free creative movement, for while Bergson the time notion of time was non-teleological, while case of Iqbal it's teleological. So we'll go into, so these are really technical details, but the point, if you see Reconstruction writings, or even if you see his whole of he's very much the way he has constructed times, and he has taken viewpoints from for example Iraqi mini space and mini time orders, which were the relevant debates of relativity. So the way he tried to say that Whiteheadian relativity may be more closer to Muslim student who wants to study things. That epistemology is more clear, more closer. So he has not elaborated upon how Whiteheadian relativity is. So it's a task which is left for future students, but he is alluding to that very thing. How Whiteheadian relativity or interpretation of relativity. So he is not satisfied with the Einstein, how Einstein interpreted time in that sense, not time in the sense of technically trying to understand time, trying to understand the sort of scientific materialism which was necessitated by Hume. So that if you read at the end of the Reconstruction, he says Hume's Einsteinian mathematical universes. So if I just quote him at the end, he's saying like this: Einstein's mathematical view of universe completes the process of unification started by Hume, and true to the spirit of Hume's criticism, dispenses with the concept of whole force all together. The point of Hume's criticism is to emancipate empirical science from the concept of force, as he urges. He has no foundation in sense experience. So this was the first. So he is not satisfied with the way Einstein would want to. So there you can interpret Einsteinian relativity in many ways. It's what's the import of people who work in philosophy of science. Maybe Einstein was more a technical physicist, having a bit of taste in philosophy. He was not a philosopher in that philosophical sense. But you can say the interpretations of Einsteinian relativity, as far as the philosophy is concerned, whether it leads to materialism, whether it implies what I should say, atheism, whether it implied support for religion or opposing religion. So he did not address those questions, or he was not interested, or so that's the point. So what's the philosophical import of mathematical theory of relativity? People like Whitehead have discussed these issues in that sense. So Iqbal wants to, in the background of his understanding of medieval, what I should say, space and time being of many orders. There is not one order of space and time. There are many spaces and many times. And in that context, how to see relativity and how to see relativistic, not only relativity, quantum theory also. How we could see the epistemic, how it interfaces with his own religious epistemology or Quranic epistemology in that sense. And the fourth, maybe first we have discussed his knowledge, the time. The third is that, for example, God, nature, and man. So how, for example, when he tries to discuss Ashrite views of time or Ishraq, so he's how God, nature, and man. So for Iqbal, religion, he quotes famously, God is a concept and world is a percept, of a quotation from Ibn Arabi. So the world is a concept and God is a percept in that sense, or works of nature or gods. So what we experience as nature, it's work of God in that sense. So there's a direct relationship between God and man, and God and nature, and how man his being in this world or universe or ashraf, he is trying to perceive that creator, or is there a way how we can relate to him in that sense, or is there an epistemology, or is there a philosophy, or is there a theology? So how we can relate with him apart from his use of choice of poetry and philosophy, his debates, he has tried to construct. And the fourth one was that ijtihad. So in that sense, here Iqbal, his training as a lawyer or legalist, in that sense, it comes handy because, for example, in Iqbal, in Islam, there apart from Quran and Hadith, there is ijma, there is a qiyas or analogical reasoning, and there is ijtihad. So Iqbal has in one of the penultimate chapters, in threadbare discussed role of ijtihad in that sense. So he is trying to say that we need to have a new law, and the way legalists have worked laws, whether it's Hanafi jurisprudence or Maliki or Shafi or the different jurisprudence which has been, there needs to be we need to rework it to address the problems of their times. and the problems are stemming from the sociological, the cultural, the legal, the issues which are there, and a lot of problems are there, and they have continued this time. They have not been addressed in that sense. So you can say, even if so, whether it's philosophy of law or it's working of law vis-a-vis those Islamic principles of Quran and Sunnah, and how Hadith literature has been carefully constructed, and there are debates of history and it. In that sense, Iqbal would want to have a very he would want to develop a school law uh, and articulation of law, and understanding of law, which will address to the needs of times, whatever those may be. We are there, and it has been continued. So that principle of uh, uh, legal reconstruction, that is impending in that sense also. And the last one is how Islamic doctrines are operating as operating principles in the society. So that's it. So this is important. So in that sense, if Iqbal is taken to be a philosopher, and not only in the philosophical sense or the poet philosopher, or so he's also very keen to see how Islamic principles are seen to be operating in society as large, and how we can, what I should say, develop a just system. Because if you see whole of Iqbalian theme, he is not satisfied with the way the materialism after First World War, how nations, European nations, were fighting for their colonies, and the sort of materialism and gold hunger and other things, a lot of ills it brought to the world as well as subcontinent. So he's simultaneously on one side critiquing that he's not comfortable with that, but on the other hand, the base of it, if you want to replace the dominant Western or the way of how things and ideas have developed, how to replace it? So you need to have an alternative. But he is not very satisfied with the way things have been there in the way ulemas. So he's time and again not satisfied with the ulemas. They are only interested in debates which were not relevant there and then, and their incapacity to just move beyond a certain point. Their ossification was very much there. So he would want to reconstruct in that sense. So in that sense, he is taking. So he's very much aware. He's having pulse how Turkish writers, how Egyptians, how Iranians, how sociologically Afghans. So whole of Muslim world, or in Indian subcontinent also, how people see things in different ways, how mysticism has grown, or the certain movements, whether it was Zia Golgap, whether it's Ataturk, how they are interpreting things. So he is satisfied partially with them. He is not totally sometimes satisfied, and he is trying to somehow speak. Uh, he is trying to say that we need to have an alternative which has sound legal basis also, and sound principles which need to be worked out. So he is being keen student of history. He is also not this which I'll say at the end is that, for example, the way Ibn Khaldun will talk of rise and fall of societies, in the same way he the way he's not agreeing to the way Western scholarship or historians, whether it's Spengler, MacDonald, a lot of people he has discussed in Reconstruction writings, and those Reconstruction writings where the panic of Eastern civilization, or it's given, the demise is given, so you cannot come again in that sense. So he is trying to say we need to come, go and collect the ashes and come the debris, and we have to reconstruct and revisit those principles back, which will just make us relevant to our times. And the way, and taking Quran as a fundamental book, it will guide us in that sense. Because if you start, he says that Quran is a book which emphasizes deeds, and Quran, the spirit of Quran is more empirical and rational. Whenever Quran says that you think over this universe, you see how winds have gone, how Lail Nahar, how day comes after night. So there is enough for believers. There are signs in both Anfus wa Afaq as well as history for believers. So these signs have to be. So the spirit of scientific culture is. You can say it's directly the inspiration is Quran. So for Iqbal, the Quran is maybe the primary inspiration, and he is very much thoroughly trying to see how Quran can be Quranic principles have to be understood in letter and spirit, and how their application and how its understanding right across can be there, and it has to be seen in the sense of how Islam has grown from for 1400 years or so, in that sense, the time of Iqbal, and how it can be seen in that sense in the times he was living in. One other thing is about Iqbal's understanding of ego, how he sees ego or khudi. He has developed a whole chapter in it. So here I want to mention is that he wanted. So if I'll quote him, he says the infinite. He did not want that finite to get dissolved in infinite. In that sense, that infinite God. So the finite should remain finite, but his realization of finite for that infinite should make that finite more. You should go to higher levels of experience. It should not that finite should that it should lead to, you should dissolve into the larger things. So metaphysical pantheism or metaphysical monism. So Iqbal tried to see the development of ego, who would want to develop in that sense. And in that sense, he's also sometimes, if you say, at the end, he even says the notion of time. For example, he says that, okay, that's another topic, we are going to discuss it later. So what we have done in this today's class is we have tried to elude how Iqbal, Allama Iqbal, being a philosopher, poet, philosopher. So in his even the very etymology of reconstruction, reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. So he is trying to say there is impending need for reconstruction of religious thought with the coming of different developments, whether scientific developments, whether philosophical developments, as well as sociologically the way Muslim societies were in those times. So he feels that, or even at all, we need to reconstruct our legal, because Western law, the notion of God, it has the notion of that sovereign. Because if you read Iqbal, there he says that the whole idea of induction, scientific induction, is the discovery of induction leads to a great discovery. means going from particular to general. Those small things, they will lead to that ultimate source of Islam. The law of Islam is God Himself, Creator Himself. So that's a discovery, and that discovery has to be seen unless and until we reconstruct our judicial system, which was mired in those unwanted or unwarranted legal debates or ossified outlooks, maybe due to colonialism or maybe due to how things in Islamic jurisprudence developed over centuries. So Iqbal wants to somehow correct that thing also in his way, the way he would want to have reconstruction writings in that sense. So, what is reconstruction of religious thought in Islam? So, it's a reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. So, people may disagree with it. Some people, we need whether we are reconstruct religion is there, it has been absolute there, and Islam is same for once for all times to come. But in that sense, he is trying to say how we can reconstruct the religious thought in the wake of the different developments in sciences, different developments in philosophy, and a lot of political developments. The political developments is also that Muslims, maybe for 400-500 years, they had been in power. They had been displaced from that power thing. They were superior, and they had, whether it was in India, it were Mughals, there were Ottomans. So he has that sense that they have been displaced from that pedestal, the drawing seat. So why they have been left over? So there can be the diagnosis of Iqbal can be seen vis-a-vis how he wants to reconstruct the entire religious thought process. So since reconstruction writings have been they have been very much influenced in Muslim world generally also, since having both positivities as well as criticisms which are part of that study. So whatever may the case may be, so what we are going to say in the coming lectures, we are going to develop each chapter and accordingly see where I can contribute to these reconstruction writings. There may be 7 chapters, so I'll try to see what is the relevant literature which has come from. So there is a huge literature online also on this reconstruction writings, and there is a textual literature also. So we'll see where we can relate that literature post reconstruction and pre-reconstruction also, and with the eye also having a prospective analysis. We'll see how to see the reconstruction writings reconstruction writings for future also, how best we can see reconstruction. So if there are 95 years, so how things may, how one is how things, where things are pointing. So because Iqbal is in that sense a very what I should say, you can say reference point in that sense, because Iqbal being a reference point can be very much helpful because you can directly the pointers can be taken there. Reconstruction before reconstruction and after reconstruction. So this is the phraseology which may be helpful in that sense. How the sort of problems, or you can say the sort of how we can see metaphysics, how we can see philosophy, how we can see knowledge, how we can see various developments in science. So I have not talked of maybe we'll discuss the role of human psychology, psychiatry, for example, he has prayer, history, so ego, self, philosophy, developments in physics, what I should say, sociology in that sense, how these entire things, there has been a huge monumental change since those times also. So but a lot of questions what Iqbal has left unanswered, or he has eluded them, they can be addressed in that perspective. And a lot of things have been resolved in that sense, we'll see. And a lot of things are there, they are partially left, they have been partially left as resolved. So this is the way we are going to just continue with our tryst, how we understand reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. Hope you may enjoy it in future also. Thanks.